Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for June 24th, 2014. The tropics are dead right now, and as I often like to do, I want to use this session as a learning opportunity for you to educate you about El Nino just a little bit. And so I have found a couple of graphics that will help me to accomplish that goal. First of all, I know it's kind of small to see, but this is the El Nino regions that I talk about. I finally found that graphic. I'll outline what's what here. This is Mexico, and outline Central America. There's Florida, and then there's South America. This would be the Western Pacific, and there's Australia right there. Alright, you get the idea? So this is the Eastern Pacific over here, and this is the Western Pacific over on this side, and this would be north, and this would be south. Okay, so this is the Nino 1.2 area, the 1 and 2 region, right here, right off the coast of South America, near the Galapagos Islands, west of Colombia and Ecuador. And then we have the Nino 3 area. So this is 1 and 2, this is the 3 area, right in here. And then you have 4, which begins here and heads over towards the Western Pacific. And then, like a Venn diagram, you have the Nino 3.4 area right smack in the middle. And this is typically what we look at to determine when the El Nino state has changed, either in favor of warming or El Nino conditions and abnormal warming, or abnormal cooling, La Nina conditions, or even neutral. And so this is the most recent departures from normal. Right here you can see that. The Nino 4 area is sitting at 0.5 degrees Celsius, so that's this region here. The Nino 3.4 area is also at 0.5 degree Celsius, and that's this region right in here. And the Nino 3 region is at a full degree Celsius, and that's this region here. And then the Nino 1-2 area is a healthy 2.1 Celsius above normal in this limited area right here. And that's also reflected on these neat little graphs that they provide. And this is your time series here, up and down, etc. And you can see below, colder than normal, warmer than normal, warmer than normal, whatever. So that's how that all works out, all right? Now, keep all this in mind. This is the Nino regions, and typically what happens is you get these bursts of warm water that come across the Pacific like this, from the Western Pacific, these so-called oceanic Kelvin waves underneath the water, the subsurface water. It runs into South America, upwells, gets brought westward by the trade winds, and then starts to warm the area abnormally. So this is the graphic that I show often, and I'm going to refresh it so that it'll animate for us. And you can see it only goes back several weeks, but you remember this warm pool here began over here, and it moved all the way across, and it's been eroding away. I've been showing this quite often. And note the very large area of cold anomalies that has popped up right here at the end of the graphic sequence. Look at that. It's literally being chiseled away, and so this encompasses the entire Pacific. So this would be your Nino 1.2 area, and yeah, it's quite a bit above normal. Your Nino 3 area comes out about like this, and the Nino 4 about like this, and the Nino 3.4 is somewhere in here. A rough estimate of how things work out. So you can see that the Central and Western Pacific, while it warmed at one point, it's losing that warmth substantially and rapidly. And it's interesting to note that the different climate models that were predicting a very strong El Nino are now backing off, and in fact, we should see this region over here start to cool off dramatically in the coming weeks. I can't wait to show you this by the end of July, for example. I think you're going to be stunned. So let's take a look at some history. This is some different El Nino and La Nina events. Typically, the way the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA and American interests define El Nino is that we have a 0.5 Celsius threshold, positive or negative, positive for El Nino. So let's just stick to El Nino, over a 3-month running average, typically speaking. And so let's look and see. Back in 2002, the April, May, June average was 0.5. By May, June, July, 0.7. And through the hurricane season, it was pretty warm, reaching a peak of 1.3 during the roughly October through January of 03 time period. So we had a pretty healthy El Nino in 2002. It died off into 03. In 2004, we hit the 0.5 threshold during the June, July, August time frame. You can see that right there in 2004, right there, okay? And then we went to 0.7, 0.8, 0.7, 0.7, 0.7, and this was a weak El Nino event. But look, during the peak of the hurricane season when Florida was pummeled that year, August, September, October, in this time frame, September, October, November, it was 0.8, 0.7, just barely, well, the Australians call it 0.8, the Bureau of Meteorology Climate Prediction Center is 0.5, so we were 0.3 of a degree warmer by the peak of the hurricane season. Then in 05, check it out, it was warm neutral for the most part, just this side of warm. See all that? 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.2, just slightly above neutral. We call that warm neutral. And then in 06, another El Nino event came in, etc. And then we had the La Nina in 07 lasting through 08, it looked like. And then in 09, again by July, August, September, 0.5, etc. And this one was pretty strong, peaking out at 1.6 as we started 2010, 09 into 10. We peaked out at a 1.6 Celsius above normal. And then we were cold ever since. And that really led into a downturn of tropical activity globally. Took all that energy out of the air. I mean, look at all that blue and neutral and then cold neutral in here. But then look at 2012 when the Euro was trying to pop an El Nino. Why this didn't get declared right here, it was close. 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, and then down to 0.2. We came close to El Nino conditions here in 2012. So what's happening now? Let's just jump ahead and get to the point. 2014, unfortunately, we don't have data yet for April, May, June. We're still in June. But right now we're looking at about an average of 0.5. Okay, so we could maybe call this 0.5 for April, May, June. I believe this will go down in May, June, July, June, July, August. I just don't see that we're going to have that strong of an El Nino, and certainly not 0.9, 1.2, 1.3, none of these 1.4s, etc. that we saw in these other years, 02 and 09. So the bottom line, there's definitely warming going on. We can clearly see that. But I think once this starts to mix out and erode away as this continues to make inroads, we'll start to drop the overall indice up here, the index, the sum of all these different regions, and we may barely reach El Nino conditions. And so that'll be an interesting twist to see what happens. As I said, if the climate models got the El Nino wrong, maybe they got the sea level pressure anomalies and other factors wrong for the Atlantic Basin, and who knows, maybe we add a named storm, a hurricane, and a major hurricane or two to the mix. Maybe the Atlantic just remains hostile. It's hard to tell, but this one big piece of the puzzle is clearly cracking around its edges and will no longer fit the big picture. How's that for an analogy for you? All right, well, that's it from me for today. Mark's out of HurricaneTrack.com. Hopefully this made sense to you. I'll be back with something else for you tomorrow.